So this story is quite believable, but the point is that Muhammad loses the way. And in doing all this fancy footwork in his story, he doesn't get Joseph to prison. And then as an afterthought, he has, oh, even though nobody blamed him for this thing because Joseph was so beautiful, and therefore the husband understood that the woman would be attracted to him and so on, and he forgave her and all this, and Joseph didn't get to prison. And then later on, he said, oh, well, Joseph went to prison, I forget why, in the story ultimately. He just has that as, he gets so involved in the plot of the woman and the man that he can't get beyond it. It's in the Joseph story of the Quran. In any case, here, the point is that the woman wants to seduce him, and see, she took hold of his tunic. That's in the Quran story. Ran out of the house, and he left his tunic behind in her hand. And then she screamed, look, he brought a Hebrew in to insult us. Tried to take advantage of me, line 14. And he left his tunic here. And that's why the Quran is so interested in the problem of how the tunic is ripped from the front and the back. It's not in this story, it's in the Quran. See, because this is so vivid here, this is a great storyteller. A really great storyteller. I'm not putting the Quran down. There's good poetry in the Quran, but this is a great story. That's a good poetry book. This is a great story. And so it leaves a tremendous impression. People on the Muslim side want to say, oh, this came from an angel, you know, and dictated the Quran to the Prophet. No, it didn't come from an angel, not this story. This story just came from sources that were known to the person who recited this material, and he embroidered it and expanded upon it. Okay, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, so we'll just leave that one aside at the moment. But notice, that's the first time we've had Hebrew mentioned here, line 14 and line 17, right? And that's interesting. Outsiders call these people Hebrews. Notice it's the Potiphar, and others are calling, and the woman is calling him a Hebrew. They don't call themselves Hebrews. They call themselves Israelites and things like that. So Israel seems to be an in-name, only among themselves. Hebrew is an out-name, others referring to them. And we know from Canaanite and other texts, Mesopotamian texts, Egyptian texts, that there were a group of people called the Habiru at this time in the text, or Habiru, depending on whether you're in Mesopotamia or Egypt. I don't know which is which here. And these were outsiders who were sort of like half renegades, half caravaners, people who were unconnected, who were in the trade, in the caravan trade of some kind, but in bad times they became bandits, good times they were in trading between different civilization areas. And they called them Habiru. And we think that's where the term Hebrew comes from. This term that was used in the old texts about them. So Joseph could be one of these groups who were looked upon by these people. And this could be inner stories from these groups versus outer stories. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Finally, we know that at this time in Egypt, we have a group come down called the Hyksos. And the Hyksos are non-Egyptian rulers, Semitic rulers, who come into Egypt and conquer the place for a time, a couple of hundred years, I think, and impose their own rulers on the country. And these are called Hyksos. Hyksos, I think, either means shepherd or outsider or foreign. In any case, they're outside Semitic kings. And it is quite possible that the Joseph story is part of that situation that developed under the Hyksos. And that's around 1700 or 1600 BC that the Hyksos came into Egypt. And a Semitic Hebrew child or slave or whatever could rise in a situation like that. He probably could also rise in Pharaoh's court too. But it would be more understandable if this were part of the Hyksos, which we know about, who came into Egypt at this time. So this could be quite representative of the Hyksos period in Egypt, which is then the Egyptian native dynasties took over in the Ramesses period. And Ramesses in the 1200s becomes a great Egyptian king and so on. But in the 1700s there was an interruption. That's a good topic for a paper. If you're looking for paper topics, you look into all this history of Egypt, the Amenhotep, the Akhenaten, because Akhenaten is 1400 BC, the relationship to Moses, these stories with Joseph. Those are always interesting. If you want the Genesis period, there's plenty of other material in the Old Testament. Okay. Anyway, she said, this Hebrew slave has insulted me. And the master, of course, he's not going to take the slave's position over the woman, is he? I mean, even if Joseph had tried to go after her, he still would throw him in prison, even if he hadn't, put it that way. He's not going to, but in Muhammad's story, he doesn't throw her, he doesn't believe the wife, and still he does nothing against Joseph. So Muhammad's story really loses the plot totally, because he's not interested in the salvation of the Hebrew people particularly. But Yahweh was with Joseph, 21. He goes to prison, and the cupbearer of the Pharaoh is in there. Now this might be the Hyksos as well as a normal Egyptian Pharaoh. He had put two of his officials in jail, and they have dreams, and they were prisoners. And he interprets these dreams. This is a very lengthy story, probably a very long Yahweh story. I have a feeling it's all Yahweh, though I can't promise you that. All the way 6 to 23, it's a famous story, and it's all about the dreams of the people in prison. Line 15, Joseph tells his story. I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews in the first place, even though I did nothing to warrant imprisonment. And then Joseph is taken before Pharaoh because of the dreams he's having. In any case, I guess that's this other person who's in prison with him. Here's the interpretation of the dream. In 3 days, Pharaoh will release you and hang you in the gallows, and the birds will eat your flesh. And so on the third day, he did this, and the baker was hanged, and the chief cupbearer, I guess, was another one. Anyway, you've read this more recently. So the chief cupbearer didn't remember Joseph, but later on, a couple years later, 41, Joseph has a dream. And he does, Pharaoh has a dream.